Well, who does not know me? My name is Anton. I'm the main developer of the platform for the tokenization of micro companies, and in parallel, we make a framework for description for creating our own DAO. Today I'll talk about the first product, about the framework, and in our mind we'll also have the second one. This product, a platform that has been created on the basis of the framework, and I will not talk about it today. Our framework is open source. You can go to GitHub and see we are working on the other. Since March of this year, two versions have already been released. We have everything completely open. You can see the task trackers are some sort of tasks, help us deal with the current task, and the best of this approach of the open source community. But if we're talking about the framework for DAO, let's first understand what a DAO is. And on the one hand, everything is very simple. I think everyone as a whole knows what decentralization is, what an organization is, right? It's a set of some actors who interact with each other. About autonomy, I think everyone understands that this is just some kind of code with some kind of formal rules that can self-make a decision. Everything is simple here, but from a business point of view, now we'll have 5 minutes there, we'll tell you a high-level view that it's not about technology, about what DAO is generally needed for, and the best to start with smart contracts from the blockchain, right? I'm here on this slide prioritized features which give the blockchain, and actually when today we come to real business and offer them to somehow implement the blockchain, we say that it gives you transparency, it gives you protection from censoring. To be honest, it's not interesting to anyone because it's not real business understand what it means to open your salaries, show bonuses, show your cash flow and so on. Well, to be honest, it's more an obstacle than a plus. But today, everyone wants to work with the crypto, with tokens directly and tokenize some assets from real life. And when we talk about tokenization, there is such a project, La Token, and they say and argue that tokenization can raise liquidity. They give an example that we, for example, let us sell some apartment or sell a picture, it costs $1 million, we divide it into, 1,000 parts, and it seems like it raises liquidity because it has become easier to buy. You don't need to spend a whole million, you can buy one piece. But the problem arises here that if 10 people buy this picture, one will have 20%, another will have 5%, some will be a small part, and some part of the tokens will remain unpurchased at all. What if, like the majority, the most important token holder of this picture wanted, for example, to sell or to export to another country? And here a management problem arises. The governance problem. When we have smart contracts, as a result, we come to the fact that we need to somehow manage this organization, which we have described here, create some kind of crypto protocol or some kind of system. And on this slide, I specifically tell what is the advantage of DAO, what it can give you. Firstly, DAO simplifies resource management, as I said before. Secondly, DAO formalizes the rule, relationships within your company or organization, non-profit organizations of any kind. But when we describe all these rules in a convenient form, in the form of a code or in the form of some kind of domain-specific language, DCL, or somehow, we immediately have the opportunity to add various initiatives, for example, monetary initiatives for different actors. In fact, what will it give us? This will give us a reduction in the asymmetry that occurs in such a system. In general, in our life, there are a lot of problems with asymmetry. In various systems, well, for example, buyer asymmetry seller. When I sell a car, I have more information about this car, yes, and I know that it, for example, will break in a month. Yes, as a customer, You as a customer do not have this information, so asymmetry rises. And in real life, where are you going? What are you doing? You use insurance mechanisms or you use a guarantee mechanism. If the car breaks down in a month, then you will be reimbursed for its full cost and you are protected. Symmetry is reduced. Likewise, DEL helps reduce symmetry and add initiatives, add some stakes and some conditions so that everyone in this system is motivated for the common good. Stepan Gershuni on Facebook recently wrote that a crypto is not about money at all, it's not about transferring funds at all, not about keeping money. This is more about the fact that we can make decentralized systems and new business models as a result. That's actually DAO for that. What is DAO framework? How it help you? What are we actually solving? DAO framework consists of different subsystems. The most important subsystem is the permission manager, in which you can describe the various roles, who is responsible for what, who has what rights, and so on. There is a token management subsystem, there is a reputation subsystem, the dispute resolution subsystem, there is a financial subsystem, we call it money flow. In the financial subsystem, you can, for example, describe the budget of your company. If you have a startup or some kind of corporation, you can directly write down the monthly budget, which you spend on the internet, for example, half a month, there on Ether, on the office you have, the Ether, and so on. Salaries, bonuses, everything, how dividends are calculated. You can also use this financial subsystem in order to put the roadmap in steps. For example, if you collect money, there is not necessarily an ICO, you somehow donates you collect. You can say that if we collect 100 others, we will make such and such features, my milestones, my roadmap. If we collect more than such features, and it all works automatically out of the box. You don't need to write anything. You just take the go to the console, write npm install Tether core, and already on the basis of our core, you can configure your own organization. But still, a power subsystem, as I said before, in addition to the permission manager, is the governance subsystem, organizational control management subsystem. And when you, for example, if you remember about the DAO, about this huge hack, yes, you remember that there was a proposal, there were curious, there was some money that came which were distributed. In fact, the DAO is a foundation, and out of the box we also plan various schemes for different organizations, such as foundations and so on. You can take these templates and on this basis of these templates already set up your own organization. But among other things, DAO still provides support at runtime. They offer you convenient factories to create contracts, support for the upgradability of contracts, various registries, and help you easily divide the code into the library and storage such a pattern. What are the DAO framework? In fact, there are 3 bad DAO frameworks, and one is very good. The most famous is number 4. All of them are very similar, because if we take operating systems and compare them, an operating system also has a kernel. Some subsystems there, registry, a permission subsystem, and so on. Similarly here. On this slide you can hardly see, I can speak with words. Well, how would I tell what the core of our system consists of? Our system, the green one, the DAO base, this is the core, and in fact it's a pattern controller and storage. Storage is highlighted by reds, which stores various mapping groups, permission, controls tokens, also leads proposal, and what is interesting here, it's interesting here that with these arrows I show that we have standard actions that are also spelled out directly from the box. For example, there is an action to release tokens, there is an action to accrue reputation, there is an action to add a new person to the group, remove from the group, and so on. Well, the set of these actions is very limited, but you can always expand them. You can write your client or your kernel, which will have, for example, 50 different actions, 50 different permissions. The main thing is that the client, it will work through the standard method and through the standard action, for example, issue tokens. The system is very expandable, and in this case, the kernel does not know anything about this client. If this client is allowed to fulfill this permission as a smart contract, then everything is fine. I don't even know his address. He just added a call, comes to me, and I allow him to do it. What example of a real DAO scheme can I give? Recently, I went to a podcast called DEVZEN podcast and then have this situation. They have 5 people who lead this podcast. They have one presenter who is in charge. They have 5 advertising slots in each issue. They have a guest who comes to them in podcasts. And I offered them just this scheme, which they have informally, is not described anyway, it simply exists in words, described directly in the form of smart contracts, here on top of our framework. And it turns out from them, in that situation, one of the asymmetries is that, for example, you invited a guest to release, but he did not come, and he loses nothing. Well, he does not guarantee the release. It is bad for a podcast, but except for the loss of some kind of reputation, nothing happens. Due to the fact that we directly made a template for them, this asymmetry does not exist. As is a guest to come, he must put some kind of stake tokens. Accordingly, if he does not come in, the DAO system itself decides to punish him and his tokens are burned. Therefore, he has an additional interest to come. Well, this is such a contrast example, but it shows very well how it really works for us. And now, I'll show you just now. If you will see directly the code of this contract as it's written here. Here is some kind of business logic there. Here is the DEVZEN DAO core. There are some internal structures here, these podcasts for selecting the next episode and so on. And there are some methods that can be triggered, for example, by changing parameters. This is the first method, update DAO params. The second method is, for example, to withdraw the collected Ether for the tokens that were sent. The next method is to switch to the next release, and so on. Here we see that these methods, they are open to all. This is, well, there is only the owner modifier. Well, we are not talking about any permission. But in order for us to configure permission, we can inherit from this contract. Here I'm showing you the real code. Here is an inheritor, in which all these methods have already been redefined. Absolutely all the same methods have been redefined, and here there is already a specified action and permission. Can I do this method? And this modifier is actually very interesting. I'll tell you how it works a little bit further, the modifier itself, but in the course of when this contract is created, there is such a factory that creates it. We actually set up the permission that can be done here. We say that, for example, anyone who is in the group of the DEVZEN team, right here, can add to the DAO proposal. But all other actions are done only by voting. Well, to burn a stake or choose the next host, you actually need to vote. As the voting is configured, there is a bit longer, such a longer code, but I'll say this, that they have different types of voting in this system. Here is the simplest, is used by one person, one board, and has a parameter that quorum should be 50%. But there are different options, there is a quadratic vote, there is a vote with delegation and so on, like that. How do action calls work? Well, I spoke about permission before, and for example, we have permission to proceed to the next release. He requires a vote. If the caller has directly says, then this action is simply immediately called and everything passes. If he does not direct access, then our subsystem automatically creates a proposal, creates a vote, and people begin to vote. As a result of the vote, if it ended successfully, we collected the votes of the people and they said, but yes, we allow. Just a method call occurs. Well, the proposal leads to the fact that some method is simply called, and this method we don't really know. And each case differently is called. And here's the interesting. Here the most important thing I wanted to say is that this is done automatically. You do not need to run this code, you do not need to call yourself, create a vote, somehow conduct it. That is automatically. If you call this method, two outcomes. Either there is no voting, everything passed at once, or you have a voting system and it was created. If we compare with Aragon, here too now there was a question before the performance and they often ask, they say, what is better for you than Aragon and what is worse for you? I would say that Aragon has a vision that this is such a very large system. They even call themselves the operating system for DAO. They have a lot of different models, a very large documentation. There's more of a Windows approach. They have a registry, also very similar to Windows. They even call, in fact, the kernel, and they call it the same as an operating system kernel. An application is what we say models or subsystem. So even their names are the same as when creating operating systems. Everything is much easier for us, it's easier for us, we have less code, we don't have any complicated registers in the kernel. If you want to add some kind of registry type functionality outside, then you can always do as a client. The kernel does not control this. The difference. Here's on the diagram I showed another framework, this DAO stack. It can be seen that they actually have a similar approach. They also have controller and there is all storage. Storage they call avatar. The minus from my point of view is that they do not have a permission system as extended as ours. They have only basic methods which in fact are not clearly described as permission, and here they call clients bark. They are called schemes. And we see that the controller maintains a list of schemes and the controller simply looks that if the scheme is such, then I give you permission to do everything and anything. It's possible to distinguish and it's possible, for example, to forbid this scheme to call some method there. If this scheme is hacked in some way, the connect will gain access to the entire core in the stack. Well, this approach. They believe that maybe it simplifies life, this permission. On the contrary, we believe that let the resolution be much better, the whole table, but we'll say very granularly who is responsible for what. For example, what kind of person on the board of directors can do that, or what kind of person in the group of managers, for example, can change your salary. Suppose so. It's impossible for them. Then I would like to go and tell such more technical things about how the voting works for us. The voting takes place just with tokens. And here the next thing is interesting. Well, suppose our board counts your strengths by the number of tokens in your wallet on the balance sheet. If you start a board and it can last a month or two until it comes to some kind of completion, people will vote there, they will say yes, we agree, that Anton is no longer the CEO of your organization, we want to fire him. But it takes time, and we consider the force cutting to the balance of tokens. What should people do if, for example, they want to sell their tokens to or relocate to someone during a war to make an ordinary simply transfer? There are different approaches to solve this problem. The first approach is to simply ban transfers. Just say that, dudes, until the warning is finished by 2 months, the tokens are locked, you cannot sell or buy. The second approach is more correct. To do this, just mark copy the balances at the time of the start of the board. We see here we have two people, person A and person B. They had one token, another have 20. The voting began, and then person A wants to transfer 30 tokens to person B. What do we do? We have here this step when the voting begins. It is obvious to copy the card of balances, but we cannot do this technically, because it can contain millions of records and the card of balances. Just no gas is enough to cycle through the odds and make a copy of it. Therefore, we use such a technique, which in normal programming is called copying on the fly, copy on write, copying while writing. The idea is that when holder A transfers a token to holder B, we copy this card in parts. Well, we just remember this moment where the previous balance of holder A and holder B. It turns out that we have some kind of additional map, which at first was in the zero state, but at the end of this map, there's a state that stores the previous values. And if other holders will exchange with each other, this card will remain so. If you remember 120. Well, I can direct the code to show how this is done. We have two parts of this algorithm. The first part is reading the data. If you do not see something, you say, because here the projector, a little bit with the resolution we did not guess. In general, if we want to read the user's balance sheet, we don't it as before from the balance sheet card at the current time. If we want to take balances at the time of the start of voting, then we need to check whether we have an entry in the copy. If there is an entry, then we return it here on this line number 24. If not, then we just return the card. Mechanically this is reading, but when we write, well, we make a transfer. We do a method redefinition here, and we call up copying on the fly. Like preserving previous balances, we see that if your card is not yet full, this is a copy. Canonically we keep the previous balance and then we make the transfer as before. And as a result of this agreement, we come that we have two completely valid cards. From these, you can read current balances and sell your tokens there. Change them on the stock exchange, and this card stores balances and the time of the start of voting. But there is another snag. The algorithm is not as simple as it would seem. If we finish the voting here and we want to start a new one with the next stage, it turns out that the map actually stores the wrong values. It's dirty. It needs to be somehow marked that it has invalid data. How to do it? If we again try to go through the cycle of odds and reset all this data there, for example, we will not have enough guess, but we can actually do this on the fly. It's important to make our two cases. When to add a new variable to the last record in this sale, and if the last record passed before the beginning of the second board, then this is dirty data, this is a dirty record. It must be discarded and rewritten. If the last entry in this cell was after the start of voting, then it's valid and everything is fine. Probably in words it sounds difficult, but in fact it gives us the opportunity to run the vote in parallel. Run the vote sequentially, somehow and not block the balances. Well, all people can sell their tokens as they please, and their power as a vote will be considered when, for example, voting began a month ago. The same is dividends. We have the financial subsystem which distributed dividends as usual it happens. You collected during the SEO, I don't know, you sold some goods and services and you have accumulated revenue, a profit has accumulated. You have tokens holders with a different number of tokens each and they want to get their dividends. It works pool model. the model when they themselves come to you and take their money. You can just do the odds cycle and send out dividends at once. It turns out that the situation is very similar to the vote. You have some moment of the start of the distribution of dividends, and people can take these dividends for 6 months. Well, until a person takes the last one, this distribution will last for 6 months. It's not instant, until everyone comes and does not pull. And this approach with copy and write is absolutely works here. We must also remember the balances at the time of launch and just use absolutely the same methods as before. Well, the last technical thing probably, about which I will also tell you very briefly now. This is how delegation works in polls. If you have a so-called liquid democracy, when you can transfer your power to another person, this is very similar to the sale, but in fact you do not change balance. You have, for example, 1,000 tokens, but for example 500 tokens I give his friend Andrew to vote. And here there is an approach too, and we can organize a delegation table who delegated how much to whom and calculate it somehow. And the second approach, and more interesting, is that we can make a copy of the token, actually a complete copy, and you will simply have one token of your organization. And the second token will be a token that you also use as a normal transfer, a regular wallet transfer to people, and is powered during the voting. And we come to the fact that this whole thing with copying on the fly can be made much easier. You just need to make a copy of the token that can read these balances, and in fact, you have two tokens. The first is the current balance of the real, and the second token is that which is generated as if at the moment of the beginning of the voting or at the moment of the start of the distribution of dividends. Well, something like this. We have not yet implemented it. Here is approach with copying tokens, but we are planning to do it now. We have already added the first approach with copy and write, a pull request to open Deplin, and hope that they will accept it. And maybe here is the second approach with copying tokens. We will also make a pull request. I have it all. Thanks. Are there any questions? Hello, Anton. Very nice to hear that for the organization I have it. You are the framework. Please tell me, in spite of the fact that I'm technically so a specialist, I want to know support from you as such. You can expect, or you have put everything as a GitHub, laid out in open source and principle as is. Take it and use it. And then read the manual and you roll out, or maybe you roll it out with your problems or not on this side. How you help, not so much to the community, but to technical specialists who wants to use it and maybe somehow bring something to you there, your platform. The question is clear. See, we now have the task of building a community around our framework, around our product. We don't directly earn from it. I saw that we have a second product that we will monetize. That is platform on top of the framework, but it seems to me on the contrary, the open source world, at least at some early stages, if you come to such a project as just as help, you can directly get an issue on GitHub, help me deal with something there, or do some custom feature for me there. On the contrary, we very much support. Well, we will always support you. Here I think you should have no problems. So I think that if you come to Aragon, then they have completed the SEO and so on, ask them to finish something, there will be more problems. You know, I still say so. So happened that I was very well acquainted with the guys from Aragon. I was in Switzerland for a very long time. They really work there, yes. They're a little expensive, but they're very kind to contracts. And they're ready to help. Yeah, they're trying to make a certain profit from this. I would like to know if you're counting on this support on this and really earn a little or still leave it. Roughly speaking, a brief that will count on your second project will then be some way to monetize. Well, this is a question about monetization. Again, probably. We don't plan. Look, I want to get a service from you, not monetize. I want to get an answer from you. Understand that it's worth something. I want to get as much as possible, or cheaply or not, to go to competitors. Here is my question. Okay, understood. Yes, we'll always help you. But our idea is that we're not going to get paid for the support of our framework. That is to help is one thing. If you want to try to use our schemes, of course, we are always happy. This is our idea, that we posit it in our open source. Something more for money? Probably not, because, well, just this approach somehow seems to me to be not very true in open source. We still not plan to be Red Hat. But I will tell you so. It happened by chain that Microsoft, through the existence of open source in any case, the Linux Foundation suddenly acquired it. It's already much such a commercial story. It's possible that many people don't like it or not, but it's still a global giant. Thank you so much, you're doing a very cool thing. Thanks. Thanks for the report, they said hello. Listen, what are the components so interesting? You're going to cut the coming, I don't know, maybe a month from this, beside this copy and write token. Is it understandable? Well, maybe I still don't know something interesting, which was extremely interesting. Copy on write is still the code that lies inside. It's impossible to tear out as a model. If you just take our token, look at the code, of course you can use it, but we have such a system. In fact, while we have a dispute resolution system under our reputation, it's developing now. We have it practically at the initial stage, and in general, here we are planning to partner more with other projects, because there are already a lot of such undertakings that people make just the reputational subsystem, or people make dispute resolution separately. And accordingly, we would rather like to partner up and not to do the same thing that others already have. But I have to make a copy, and we are open source, and they are open source. We don't work together, that's like this. I personally asked about sheets registered supervised by tokens. Well, we're not planning to add, because this is not our focus as a framework for the DAO. Otherwise, we just slide. It will be some kind of a huge set of contracts. I don't know, it will be Open Zeppelin plus Aragon plus something else. Our approach is just the opposite. That we want a very small tool, so unique that you take it and use it easily. And can I... Yes, the question. Hey, you mentioned that you and Zeppelin either met some kind of issue or pull requests, and tell me on the basis of board, how would you like what kind of bricks in general they're used in your system from the Zeppelin library, there maybe from some other ones? Yes, of course we use Zeppelin because it makes no sense to write all the same. Zeppelin has very good audio, they have good code quality, they have excellent infrastructure, they just have all the processes already established, that the code coverage is very large, and of course we are very afraid of some vulnerabilities of bugs, like any crypto project, so using Open Zeppelin is very cool. It just relieves us of a headache. If possible, I will clarify a little question. This is cool, Zeppelin is good. The question is, what exactly did you take from them, well, and did you take anything else from anyone? In fact, we use the standard contracts of some kind from Zeppelin type, they're ownable, ERC20 tokens, 100 tokens, burnable, mintable, and so on. Well, we rather expand Zeppelin, override some methods, and there we add our own functionality above. This is so. Something more like that, I don't remember rightly, that's word Zeppelin, and I pulled probably not. Very basic contracts. Good day. When can I expect a dividend distribution tool from you? But just like a contract, or are you still talking more about the platform, such a front end when you enter from the browser, pocket with a mouse, everything cool there. What exactly about the contract? Well, about the distribution of dividends to in the near future, I think we are releasing it. Now we do not have this cube in money flow. We have it only planned. But in principle, here I don't see any technical problems. That is, in principle, this was done repeatedly in different projects, and before I personally also developed a code that distributed dividends. Just such a pool model. Accordingly, if you personally need to somehow, I don't know, if you want to try it faster, well, let's just talk after the performance and after the presentation, and we can somehow shift the priority. Here is a full openness and no worse than Aragon. Did I answer the question? Yes, thanks. Can I have another question? Hello. Very interested in the mechanism that you said copying a token. I have this question. Have you considered stupid absolutely case? I want to attract a businessman who knows nothing about the framework, even he doesn't know such words. And I said that there is a token copy mechanism. Automatically he starts thinking that if a token costs money, he can make a copy of the money. I will have twice as much. This is about another bit. About copying money, this is necessarily I saw from some meetings. From a technical point of view, how can this be explained to people who need to understand the technology? Or, for example, it has a new staff of developers who have never ever been closely associated with this. Well, here we make a product for developers in general. The framework, the very notion that you take and install this piece from NPM and somehow use it further implies that it's still more for programmers. Indeed, it's very difficult to explain to business people what is and how general configured. But when we have this second product of ours platform, when you just show this person be given our URL to this site, he will come in, will be able to configure this, who is responsible for what, who has what rights, how to add a new person, how to release a reputation, what is the reputation that it gives, and this is all a mouse without any code. That's when this question will disappear. But copying tokens is just such a technical thing. I don't even think that in general it will give him something. It's still really not copying money, it's not duplication of a token, it's just a specific decision how to keep the balance that you had somewhere in time 2 months ago. That's all. And the convenience is in the fact that there are general platforms for tokenization. The tokens can be very fast in one motion, in one line of code to release, copy somehow to do something with them, pack, divide into parts, and so on. It's possible a small remark on the previous question. In fact, you can copy any token that is, should the most expensive, the Omsgo, I don't know, or Polkadot, run through the blockchain, release a token, distribute it, and what? We don't have this. He will have zero value. We don't even make money. Yeah, so just the question itself. Thanks. I think that there is enough question from the audience. It will be possible to talk later. We'll still have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Anton. Let's applaud to Anton for the wonderful report.